quality of these languages at a given moment and allows
Yeah.
things to happen. For example, the Padam Telugu became so widely searched in the way Braj Bhasha circulated everywhere in northern India in a certain modality through, let's say, Viraha or through Tuti Rasa, whatever. You know what I mean? That's how I'm asking.
There's a kind of secret here, and I don't know the answer to it, actually. There's a fantastic beauty about Telugu in the music sense, and I think almost everybody who hears Telugu notices it. And it's not by chance that Telugu is the language of Carnatic music, the main language, you know. But also Telugu has certain expressive possibilities that are very rich. Obviously, so does Kannada, so does Tamil. These are, you know, yeah.
Is it on?
Is it on? Maybe not.
No, it's on.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's on.
Yeah, it's on. It's on. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Yeah.
No, just sorry. I think so. Better.
Try this. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Everybody can hear? Yeah. Okay. In short, I don't actually know the answer to that question, aside from the fact that there was some clearly. I think we have to do it like this, actually.
Yeah, fine.
Okay. I mean, one could say these are very, you know, deep-rooted organic civilizations that came to particular moments of very, very powerful expressivity.
But if you're talking about
Wow, sorry. You can't do with it or without it, actually.
No, he was making with it. I was just doing.
Oh, I see. Okay. So I hope nobody lost their hearing. No. Just a minute, let me.
It's okay.
It's okay? Yeah? Okay?
Yes, it's fine.
very good.
All right, okay.
So what I was actually saying is you're talking about models of the mind. Does Telugu at this time allow for the best articulation of a certain?
I mean, nobody could say that, but you could say that something very unusual and creative was happening in Telugu at this moment. That I'm, prepared to talk about and explain. But I think maybe we'll leave this for a slightly later moment because we only have about half an hour or so now, and because we'll be tired and so on. And I think that what we should do, because if I'm sort of feeling the sort of the will of the people, so to speak, is that we should perhaps read some more padams. It seems that, So I think we'll put aside the other things I was planning to do, and we'll read some more padams. And in the course of doing that, I'll also say some things of a slightly more formal and structured nature about this particular moment of the 15th, 16th century. I'll sort of take it out of the padams as we go along. And that means that of course, tomorrow we'll be doing Kudiyatam, but the day after that, I will read with you some materials that I was thinking we might get to today about these extreme states of the mind. And we'll see some very particular material that has to do.
It's okay, Roger. Please.
Yeah. Okay. You can hear me, right?
Very well.
All right. Okay. So. I'll read you some orally. You don't have any trouble with understanding if I read them aloud, right? Okay. But actually, those of you who have the handout, why don't we read one more of these Adhyatma poems, these introspective poems. There's a very famous poem, Kadaluripi Niralaga. You say you want to bathe. Can you find it? See if you can find it. We'll read a few more Annamaya Padams. And then I want to read at least a couple of Kshetriya padams with you from 100 years after. Okay? Okay? You want to bathe when the waves subside? This is a padam actually which you can hear in the various Carnatic, classical Carnatic style renditions. People know this padam and sing it. So once again, you have this introspective voice. Often it's two voices that are internal to the same speaker in a kind of dialogue with one another. That's what we have here. You really want to bathe when the waves subside. Is there an end to the endless mind? Is there an end? That's the Pallavi. You say, let me quench my thirst, and then I'll find the truth. Why should thirst be quenched? You know truth. Is there an end? All the days you have a body, why should longing cease? How can you find joy? Is there an end? You say, after I know what lies ahead, I'll forget what was before. Can you know what lies ahead? How can you forget what was before? Is there an end? That goodness that comes of knowing how to reach God, you won't find it in your wildest dreams. Is there an end? So there's this little kind of internal monologue like all of us probably have with ourselves from time to time, right? I'll just say something and then I'd be happy to hear what you think about this, but there are clearly two inner voices in some kind of conversation, and they're very different, these two voices. You know? One voice says, I'll go into the water and bathe after the waves subside, right? The other voice says, is there an end to the endless mind? First voice says, let me quench my thirst and then I'll find the truth. Very kind of understandable human emotion, you know. The other voice says, why should thirst be quenched? How can you know truth? See, one of these voices is the very familiar kind of turn of the mind that we all have when we're, I think, making bargains with the world, or with ourselves, or with the God, all kinds of calculations. We have this, then I'll do that. If this works out, then I'll do that. It's also sort of future-oriented in that way, you know. I'll forget the past once I know what's going to happen in the future, you know. And there's this other voice that says, this is a completely ridiculous way to think, you know. You have to sort of give up all this business of calculating and making bargains with God or with yourself, or with the world, or something like that, because there's some other dimension of the world. Right? And this conversation doesn't seem to quite resolve itself, as indeed, why should it? In a kind of diary-like introspective mode, why should it? We all have these competing voices, you know. But you see the intimate quality of the text. Again, it's very kind of simple and colloquial Telugu. Has an intimate quality about it. You're like overhearing a conversation between two internal voices, right? And at the end, that goodness that comes of knowing how to reach God, you won't find it in your wildest dreams. And then that question again, is there an end? Is there an end? Obviously, there is no end. So these are poems, this kind of poetry, this kind of introspective poetry, you can see, it's not meant to bring about some kind of, metaphysical resolution or something like that, some philosophical siddhanta that will allow us then to go on. That in itself would be another kind of this bargaining and calculating and making deals, right? This marketplace, bazaar mentality, right? That's no good, and that's, in fact, not what you'd want. What you'd want is for the God himself to overhear this conversation. And it's addressed to the God, actually.
Is God part of the irresolution?
Yeah.
God is absorbed into irresolution. God is not resolving anything.
Yeah. See, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. That's I think that's exactly right. The God, unlike what we might expect based on earlier sources, where you think that God will be the ultimate, you sort of, hand over all these difficulties, problems, doubts, self-doubt, hand it over to him, right, or her. But not here. On the contrary, the God seems to inhabit that kind of conversation. That's very good. So that's one of the very striking things. That's also the very modern quality of these poems. I don't know how you feel. I've had some of these poems. I'll read you another one in a moment. I once read it in a Hebrew translation in a class in Israel. Somebody came up to me. This is like the Sangam poetry. I think I may have mentioned this earlier with Ramanujan. somebody came up to me and said, it's very nice of you to say this was written in the 15th century, but it's impossible. You must yourself have written this poem. You're just kind of, projecting it onto Annamaya. And people used to say that to Ramanujan about the old Aham poems. The same thing. I'll read you the poem in question.
Because voice quality is really bad.
Oh, okay. Wow. Maybe we'll do without it. I think we can do without it. If the let
I
me.
think that can be managed. Yeah, just I think it should be okay now.
I would think we should do without it because.
Hello. Hello. How's Abraham? Roju? Hello.
It was going okay.
Hello. No, not from there. Hello.
Yeah. I think we'll just leave it. I'll manage. The two of you are in the way back. You might want to come down. You can hear me? If you can hear me, that's fine. And I'll come closer. Okay. And you'll tell me if I'm not projecting, but I'm losing my voice. So I'll read another one of these Adhyatma poems. And then usually what happens when I talk about Annamaya is that people say, why are you reading me all these introspective poems? You want to hear the love poems. So I'll read you some love poems. Okay. All right. But here's another of the Adhyatma poem. And this is one which is a particular favorite of mine. Where is my wisdom? Where is my wisdom? Where is my good sense? Time is lost, like an offering poured in the dust. I think I need this thing or maybe that thing. I never get beyond such hopes. I keep on waiting, and time lures me like a deer behind a bush, an offering poured in the dust. There's always this plan or maybe that one, and my problems will be over. I go through trick after trick, trapped in thoughts and hurt. Time melts like butter next to fire, an offering poured in the dust. I'm sure I'll be happy here, or maybe over there. So I keep moving from place to place. I don't even see the God right next to me. Time goes like empty time, an offering poured in the dust. So much. Yeah, modern. It's a little sort of too modern almost, a little spooky. An offering poured in the dust. So actually, several times in the course of these sessions, we've talked about time and thematizing time, the sense of different kinds of temporality. So here's a poem obviously about time. Time goes. Time's actually being wasted. Actually, his whole life is being wasted. Right? I have this plan, or maybe that plan. If I just follow this or that, everything will be fine. If I go over there, I'll be happy. Or maybe if I stay here, I'll be happy. All of these kind of constant kind of attempts to make sense of what might make me happy end up by just completely destroying the only possibility of any real kind of happiness. Right? His life is being wasted. This is that inner voice that's wasting my life. Time grows like an offering for them to dust. And towards the end, I don't even see the God right next to me, which is in a way the kind of real point of this. You have to remember, you have to think, I think, of this God as kind of overhearing the poet. This is an inner conversation that the poet has between different parts of himself, but it's ostensibly directed to the God. And these poems, I mean, you can hear them any day. If you stand in line for darshan at Tirupati in the long queue, you'll hear on the loudspeakers people singing these Annamaya poems, including a poem like this. So obviously they're meant for the God to hear. He's not a kind of innocent bystander. He's an intrinsic part of this conversation, right? But on the other hand, it doesn't seem that he really wants to interfere in the conversation very much. His job is to overhear it, to allow it to take place. And again, by speaking it, articulating it, by saying it the way he does, there's a sort of honesty and genuine quality about it, I think would have been very personal. That seems to be one of the ways in which this poet can draw the God out of the rock. Make him up, all his digging. I'll read you one or two love poems, and maybe we'll read two of these check. I want to read one which goes with this kind of mercenary, you know, new economic policy ethos of the 15th century. So you heard the story about Bhakti Panam Perumal. So you know that this is a god who's paying interest on a loan. See, one of the features of this period, this is a very fundamental thing. We've written quite a lot about it, Sanjay Subramaniam, Narayana, and myself. We're talking about a period where there's suddenly, really for the first time ever in India, South India, a cash economy. Suddenly cash is the predominant form of exchange. So there's a lot to say about this, and it would be better off hearing it from Sanjay than from me because he's an economic historian and he can explain it better than I can. But there's no doubt that we're talking about a mercantile cash economy in which cash has a new kind of meaning. And this also has political consequences because we now have states, these states that we call Nayaka states, early 16th century states. You can see this is happening even before them, all over the south, very noticeably in the Tamil country, also in Karnataka, places like Ikeri. We have these Nayaka states that were founded by adventurers who had money in the sense of cash. We're not talking about barter and rice and all of these things. We're talking about people who were making cash money by investing money, including by the 16th century with the foreign companies that were landing on the beach of India. And these were people who made themselves kingdoms. They were self-made men or women. They're also involved. And we have a new set of gender relations in this period, and a new conceptualization of what it means to be male and female. It's something that comes through very clearly in these poems. Talk about that. These were normally people who were free from what you could call their ascriptive, inherited collective identities, broke free of the caste boundaries, and created their own kingdoms, which they claimed on the basis of the sheer fact that they had money, that they were rich. In the old days, if you were a king, you felt you should be rich and you could take money from people. But not here. Here it's the other way around. If you have money, you should be a king. There are many stories I could tell you about it as I read the poems, okay? But you should just know that there's a new economic ethos. You hear it in that story about the god Venkateshwara that I told you. You can hear it very clear. This is connected to the rise, or say the inscription of a new elite. So groups that were, to some extent, marginal, peripheral, what they're called in the Telugu country Balijas. Balijas are a kind of warrior merchant, a kind of big category. These were groups who became dominant at this time, and they are the people who, underwrote the new political order. We're talking about adventurers, self-made men and women with a very powerful individualistic ethos. Suddenly, these are people for whom the idea of the individual, the single individual who makes his or her own fortune and fate, this is a very powerful idea. And it has older roots. We could also talk about this. So I'm going to read you a comment. If you don't believe anything that I just told you, that's your prerogative. You don't have to believe it. But you do have to listen to this poem, because here's a poem that comes exactly out of this new world, and you'll see it in a second. The god is the god who's paying interest on a loan. But here, this time, the male is speaking, the male voice, quite unusually in the others. And it's the god speaking to some woman, maybe to Alamir Manga, and maybe to some other woman, we don't know. And he says, "What profit will you get out of hiding from me? I'm right here, and I want you. Those fantastic eyes, you want to lock them in a bank? You don't even raise your head to look at me. Do you think you can invest that amazing smile at a good rate? I can't get you to smile at me. What profit will you get? Those towering breasts, are you going to put them in a vault? You're hiding them under your sari. Are you planning to hoard underground the full bloom of your youth? You keep so still under your veil. What profit will you get? You want to stash away words instead of spending them in love. You don't even move your lips. You belong to me now. And I'm God. At last we can do business. What profit me? So, if I've convinced you of nothing else today, at least I hope I've convinced you that there is something called the mind that interests these poets, that they're constantly talking about it, a new idea of the mind. And they're also operating in this kind of a new kind of social, economic, political environment, something new, something fresh and new. That's why these poems seem so modern to us, because indeed they do have that freshness. I think Annamaya knew that he was inventing something that had not been in existence before. I want to read you the very, very first poem in this whole corpus. I should perhaps tell you that the Annamaya poems were engraved on copper plates. Many of you probably know this. You can see the copper plates today in Tirupati. There's some 2,600 copper plates. I don't know if you know what that means. Copper plates are big. They're really big and they're heavy. This is a technology that was apparently imported to India from the Middle East. We have copper plates like this from the 14th century in Jerusalem, in the what's called the Hamidiyya Library in the old city of Jerusalem. Anyway, at some point, these huge copper plates were imported to the south, and they were used in the lifetime of the poet Annamaya to actually record these 12,000 surviving poems. I think it's by far the most expensive publishing venture in the entire history of South Asia. They were very expensive, these copper plates. But we're talking about a temple that had a lot of money. And we also know the story which explains why they have so much money. Right? So you see, all of this is part of that same way. So the very, very first poem, okay, which is classed as an Adhyatma poem, one of these introspective poems, is a list. It's just a very long list. And then something happens at the end, okay? So you have to prepare yourself with a list. If you can listen to this list in a kind of slightly dreamy state, that's even better, okay? So, okay, I'll just read the list. There's, of course, the Pallavi that comes before it, and then this rather astonishing list. I'm not entirely sure that the classification as an Adhyatma poem is correct. In fact, it's quite possible that these two categories were invented in order to blunt the force of the poetic impulse itself. Because the categorization often does not do justice to the poem. Very often they cross the categories. Just like we saw this Aham Puram blending in the Aham. But anyway, in theory, this is an Adhyatma poem, and it's the very, very first poem on the very first copper plate. And it goes like, you can't embrace it, you can't reject it. You'll never escape love's command. You can't embrace it, you can't reject it, you'll never escape love's command. Okay? Women's faces are lamps held up in the market. Their breasts are golden pots on the front porch. Luscious mouths, shared honey. We make love to bodies, make no mark. Now the list. Warm curries on the plate. Lovers' quarrels. Displays of pride. Spots of shade in the hot sun. Occasional hours of love. Strings you can't break. Mysterious smiles. Pain in the midst of goodness. Words within words. Oil poured on fire. Hopes that never end. The space inside desire, like drinking butter when you're thirsty. Finding the God on the hill is the one good thing that is real. I don't know about you, I find this a very moving poem for some reason, and that amazing list. It's Eileen? Yeah. 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 You know, there's a poem by Borges. You know, the Argentinian writer Borges. This poem reminds me a little bit of this poem. So I don't know the whole Borges poem, but I can tell you the very end of it. It's again a list. It's a bit like this list. It's one of these long Borgesian lists. It has all kinds of things in it, like the smell of old libraries, and the sounds of what happens at dawn, and the night before love, the incipient feeling of love, and like some doomed cavalry charge somewhere, and certain flowers and birds. It goes this long, 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 amazing list, a bit like this list. And at the end, Prof, as the poet says, all this has been given to you. Oceans have been lavished upon you, and still, you have not written the poem. More than Stephen. There are occasionally some very gentle love poems. I thought maybe I'll read one of them to you just to also to confound the two categories. Okay, so here, this is a Sringara poem, supposedly. This one, by the way, is extremely popular in Andhra, and this is one that is very often danced in dance performances, and has a slightly different quality, I think, than some of the other Sringara poems, so-called Sringara poems. Yeah. The description: Mother, who speaks so sweetly, has gone to sleep. She made love to her husband with all her feminine art. Now our friend is sleeping, long into the day, hair scattered on her radiant face. Endlessly inventive, she played with him, stealing his mind until dawn. Now, upstairs in her golden room, she's sleeping, her sari slipped from her breast. Eyes glistening, red in the corners, she made love to the father of love. Father of love is Vishnu, father of love. Eyes glistening, red in the corners, she made love to the father of love. Now she's exhausted. She's lying on her side, pearls on her thighs. The god on the hill held her in his arms. She's sleeping, a half-open flower. Half-open flower. Very, very well. Maybe we should read two of these Kshetriya poems, and then I think we may have to stop, although I could go on reading these poems for a long time. Those of you who have the handout, this is pages 8 and 9. We'll read these two poems. I'll say just 2 or 3 words about these Kshetriya padams, okay? Can you still hear me? Okay. Okay. So here, just very briefly, Annamaya, in effect, invented this padam form as we know it today. There were precedents for it, and we can think back to the Gita Govinda and all that. There are precedents for it, but as we know it, as that kind of little lyrical, personal, singular, non-repeating flash, that's something that Annamaya seems to have invented. And we know when he lived, and we have his dates and all of that, so this is a historic ground. But the padam form then took off. First of all, these padams were scattered throughout the southern Andhra country in Rayalaseema, and some of them as far north as the northern edge of the Godavari Delta. And there was a professional singers who used to carry these copper plates in batches of 5. They're very, very heavy. They're enormously heavy. They would carry them in batches of 5 on their back and go from temple to temple singing them. And that's why some of them survived in temples very far away. In Ahobilam, in Prakasham district, and further north, there are a few that survived, in other places in the Tamil country. Very quickly, this seems to have established itself as part of the temple liturgy, as it is today. So these are actually liturgical poems, sung to the god, in both types of Sringara and Adhyasana. But the padam form then went on and developed further and became the poem, the literary corpus of courtesans, Vaishyas, or what later became known as Devadas. So this is a long topic. I'm not going to go into it here, although I have a lot to say about it. But at the very minimum, just let me say that in 16th and 17th century Tanchavur, the Nayaka court, there were Vaishyas who danced in the court, and there were Vaishyas or Devadasis who danced in the temple for the god, And actually we see for the first time ever in South India a kind of fusion of these two domains of court and temple, so that the royal palace is in a way a kind of temple, and the king himself is a kind of God. You know, that's a very unusual thing in India. I think actually we don't have it in India until the 17th century. I don't think that kings were meant to be conceived really as God in a serious way until they. We could talk about that, but in these poems, as you'll see in just a moment, it's a poem sung by Vaishya courtesans to their lovers or their customers. And that customer is God, identified with God. And they say things, and of course the great Padam poet is Kshetriya. And once again, if you go to GIAN JNU, you go to Anagatam, you almost invariably will hear a Kshetriya Padam. Dance, very remarkable texts, and of course the dances that go with them also astonishingly beautiful. And if you want to hear the old Tanjavur style of singing them, because it's not the way they're sung today, if you want to know how they were once sung in the Tanjore court, so there's a very wonderful recording by Aruna Sairam, which is called something like the Tanjavur tradition or something like that. And she sings 3 or 4 of these Kshetriya padams very beautifully. And she sings them not in the standard Carnatic singing style that you hear on all the, the music, but I like call the music academy style. She sings it. She learned this directly from her teachers. That is Muktaman Vrindama. Vrindama, she's a student of Vrindama. And they came out of the tradition. It was still very much alive at that time. And it's very different, I can tell you that. And it's a kind of haunting way of singing, and very soft, gentle, and mysterious, kind of the opposite of the way one often hears Carnatic music sung in public places today. This is an intimate kind of chamber music, meant to be like that. Okay, so let's read one of these Kshetriya poems. There are many stories about Kshetriya, some of them very beautiful. We don't have time to go into that. Kshetriya supposedly came from a place called Mulva in the Krishna Delta, very close to Kuchipudi. And the god there is Mulva Gopala. So Kshetriya always mentions this Mulva Gopala. Almost all. So some courtesan is singing, and she says, "Your body is my body," you used to say, and it's come true, Mulva Gopala. Though I was with you all these days, I wasn't sure. Remember, we talked about the fact that there's this kind of doubt that's worked itself into these padams, the very basic form. So he used to say to her, "Your body is my body." And it's come true, she says. Before I wasn't sure. Some woman has scratched nail marks on your chest, but I'm the one who feels hurt. You go sleepless all night, but it's my eyes that turn red. Your body is my body, you used to say. Ever since you fell for that woman, it's my mind that's in distress. When I look at those charming love bites she has left on your lips, it's my lip that shakes. Your body is my body, you used to say. Maybe you made love to another woman, for, O Lord who rules me, my desire is sated. Forgive me, Gopala, but when you come back here, I'm the one who feels small with shame. Your body is my body. I said to you a moment ago that in these poems, the woman, Vaishya, has the upper hand. Right? I'm the one who feels small with shame, she says, but actually what she means is you should really be terribly ashamed of yourself. And this notion that your body is my body, which she must have said in a kind of flattering and relatively thoughtless mode, suddenly is literalized in a kind of almost brutal way. Become literally, concretely true. And actually, if we had time, we could talk about the role of the body in these poems, because I think there's a new sense of the human body in all of these poems. This is a new individual, and the individual has a mind, and this individual has a body, And these bodies and minds, they speak themselves again and again and again. So here's one on the mind, and then maybe we'll stop with this one. Okay, here's again Kshetraya. Now Manasubanti. That is to say, well, actually, this is sung, by the way, in Kalyani, for those of you who know it, like Yaman in the north. We know the rags for most of these. They were, of course, sung, right? So here's a poem on the mind. And she says, here's the woman speaking, if your mind is like mine, my prayers will be answered. As if sugarcane should begin to bear fruit, my pleasures will be doubled many times, if your mind is like mine. If aimlessly I doodle with my fingernail, it's your shape that appears. The moment I wake from sleep, it seems you're close to me. You know such is my love, Bharata. To whom can I say, your mind is like mine? If I turn as I go upstairs and see my shadow, I feel you're coming with me. When I sing with the tambura drone, it feels like you are singing along. The very sound of what I say sounds like your reply. There's nothing like my love, Bharata. You know that. To whom can I say, your mind is like mine? I'm always filled with joy, and the joy is always of holding you. Even if I think your name, O Bharata with the goddess, it's as if we're making love. It pleases me when all my girlfriends say you're my friend. You alone know the secret of my longing. Whom can I ask if your mind is like mine? So, if you want to say anything about that, sometimes you read a poem and you don't feel like saying anything after you've read it.
It's very worldly. I don't see why we need, like, God doesn't appear in these poems with any interest, some of them.
Well, she addresses him, Varada, Uvagopala, she's addressing him, but who is he? These are songs that were sung by a Vaishya for her customer, or her lover. It's often the Vaishya relationship was a long-term erotic, very stable, long-term. Right. But the astonishing thing that this lover is somehow the god. Right? That's
very clear.
Clear. Yeah. But it's true that, I mean, you couldn't say these are secular poems, but there's certainly poems in which this worldly existence is very kind of basic, positive, natural, kind of. And this one too, by the way, notice at the end, ends happily. Happily, like in the Annamaya. A lot of the Kshetriya padams end still in this kind of conflictual mode, in which the Vaishya speaker, the woman speaker, she has the power and she uses it in order to humiliate the lover. But here's a poem, rather gentle poem, in which she says, my life is full of joy. When I walk up the steps, I see my shadow, I know that's you following me. When I say something aloud, it's your voice that is speaking. Some very kind of beautiful, rather gentle sense of sheer joyfulness. Again, I want to say this is unusual in the love poetry of the world. It's very unusual. And may have something to do with Telugu and this kind of Telugu cultural world, or maybe that Telugu world, as it was transplanted farther south into the Tamil. Could be the interaction of these two cultures, the language. Yeah.
My mind was yours. So for example, in some cases, what happens is when you're talking about your work, almost are trying to tell us that it's not my truth. You read
such a level where you can't
Yeah.
tell that it's you.
Yeah. True.
So
Yeah.
you can improve yourself.
Well, you know, poets are in the habit of saying that this happens to them, and maybe it's true also for some artists. Probably is true in the sense that who knows where these things are coming from. It's a very interesting question altogether about control and controlling the impulse and shaping the impulse. And that's a problem, an interesting kind of problem. But I think what one can certainly say here is that the poets who wrote these poems, generally speaking, have a highly personal kind of recognizable style, in that they're very different from the Tamil Thevaram poets, for example, where there's a kind of stylistic uniformity. And I think that, I would have to say, I think that there is a very strong sense of the individual person. But it's probably not enough to, just read a few poems to begin to see that. We'd have to see the, much more sustained literary texts, the Prabandha texts from this period where that topic becomes the central topic. This individual person that says, this is who I am and my life and I've made it. And that's one of the great themes of this Prabandha text. Okay. I don't know quite where to begin with this. There's, first of all, very positive valuation of physical body centralism. Now, that's then in itself not new, although I think the kind of, what should I say, the uninhibited nature of the statement is very striking. One of the features of Tamil Bhakti, we spoke about this, earlier Tamil Bhakti, the world of the senses and the emotions, feelings, that's a positive and valued world. And they're not trying to get released from it. Usually it's very painful to inhabit this world. What they want is to be reborn again and again in order to continually experience this thing. And the idea is that the physical sensations that we have and our feelings and our thoughts and our emotions, these are the sadhana. These are the materials that we have to work with. So it's not like classical yoga. It's in fact, in a way, very antithetical to the classical yoga notion, which is that you have to somehow close off the sensory apparatus, close off all the orifices, wear away your mental vasanas, and kind of reach a point of kaivalya, where there's nothing left of that empirical being. Tamil Bhakti poetry is not like that. But nonetheless, within that Bhakti poetry, you have a kind of ambivalence. It's not that it just is all easily resolved. It's not. Still, there's a tension, and the God is this antaryami, it's somehow embedded in the body. But here, there's like a very full-blown, and uninhibited valuing of the evaluation of the body as the root of all kinds of experience, not just sort of natural, human erotic love, but also your relationships with the God. And again, I want to say that those two kinds of love are totally fused here. They're not. It's not as if there was some kind of real distinction between them. They're not. They're fused together. So that's one thing. And there's another element. So I don't have time to go into it, but we'll probably talk about this on Saturday in the context of Carnatic music. Because one of the things that's gone into this poetry is a kind of tantric world where physicality, sensuality, the physical apparatus is a kind of generative sort of mechanism or something like that, some domain that you can and really need to work with in order to actually, reach some kind of goal. So that it's something which we see in the texts of the great texts of Carnatic music, especially in Swami Dikshitari. It was a practice in tantra. We have many stories from this period, Nayaka period, 17th century tantra, where there are many very fascinating stories that, deal with these yogis and bodies that have been mutilated and then regenerate themselves, and the alchemy of physical experimentation with the body, and the body as a kind of emergent divinity in its own right, and this kind of fascination with nature itself, the natural world, now seen as an autonomous domain in which there are many bodies, and these bodies are interacting, and all of this is some part of the divine experience. So all of this has a certain kind of specificity. And if you think about it, it's kind of the natural thing. The very first thing I think I said in this seminar was that we probably need to think in terms of a non-dualistic sense of the person, even from the very beginning. So I hold by that, and there's a lot more I would want to say about that. But I also think that when you have a kind of strong notion of the autonomy of the mind and of the fantasy world of the mind and what it does and what it's capable of doing, then it's very natural that you're also going to have a new perception of the body. They somehow do go together. Not saying that it's a dichotomy or a fierce tension, it's not. But these are now domains that are reconceived, reconceptualized. So we'll talk more about that. I think we should probably stop and go home and see you tomorrow.